Hello, everyone, and welcome to another one of the Outdoors Inc. Webinars. Today, we've got another one of the Connecting with Nature series that I've been putting together with a special guest presenter today, which will be good, really interesting to hear from her. Before we get too far into it, though, we will have a look at the disclaimer and risk slides as well, with a bit of funky music to go along with it. So I'll see you again in a moment. Okay, so as you would have seen there, we've got the standard disclaimer, and also the other thing I have tended to add at the beginning of my webinars is that technology is not necessarily my strong point. So I am doing my best in these webinars and getting things happening, and today's is a little bit more technologically heavy with how we're chatting with our guest presenter. But please forgive me if my standards in the webinar production are not as high as some of the other amazing things that you've seen out there. And just in terms of the risks, today's is a computer-based session. Obviously, you're watching this on your screen, so please just make sure you're somewhere comfortable and you're not going to have any spillages of food or drink or anything like that over yourself or your equipment. So I will move my screen around a little bit as well, just so you can see what's going on and I can still interact. It's been really nice chatting with people over the phone over the last little while and touching base. Really nice to hear people's voices and stay connected. One thing that I've sort of spoken about with people and had conversations about is during this COVID-19 time and the restrictions that we've been under, although they're starting to ease slightly now, it's just that it can be a bit harder to get outside and do some of the things that we enjoy, some of our regular activities. So I wanted to come up with a little series of webinars, I guess, and having a look at our relationship, the human sort of nature relationship, and the importance of connecting to nature and why it's good for us, because we often do feel really good when we've been out and about, particularly on the Outdoors Inc. trips, and there is a lot of health benefits that come from it. If you've seen the Connecting with Nature Land or the Water episode, then there's a bit more information about the actual health benefits. I won't go into that too much today, because today we're going to be chatting with a guest presenter who's going to be sharing some really interesting stories with us. She's done a couple of trips down to some unique locations that not a lot of people get to go to, and I'm really excited about chatting with her and finding out about those trips and why she was down there, and I guess what she saw and connected with the environment, and also whether it relates to some of the things that we're sort of going through at the moment. So that'll be really good, and also some practical ideas or ways that we can continue to connect with the outdoor environment during this COVID-19 period as well. So I hope people have been able to get out and about, whether it's getting out for a walk to your local park, your local creek, even just getting outside and talking to the birds, or playing with the leaves and different things like that. So I hope everyone is going well and connecting with their outside world. So today's topic. So we are chatting with a guest presenter called Aimee Bliss. Aimee is based down in Hobart in Tasmania, and I'm filming this up at our Kensington offices, our Melbourne offices. So we are using the wonders of internet and video calls to try and make this happen today. Please bear with us if it's a little bit sloppy in terms of me getting things happening with the phone and the video calls. But I probably don't need to talk any further at this stage. I think it's probably a good time to have a chat with Aimee and hear what she has to say. So let's get into it. Okay, everybody. We have now got Aimee Bliss, who is our guest presenter for today. Online, on video, as I mentioned, she's down in Tasmania at her house in Hobart. We have had a few little difficulties with our phone video hookup, so bear with us if things sort of do pause or slow down a bit. But I'd just like to welcome Aimee to Outdoor Think webinar series and to today's session. And I'll just mention as well, Aimee and I do know each other. We've sort of spent a bit of time together over 10 years now, actually, Aimee. I was thinking about it the other day. So we might be a little casual at times with each other, or I just wanted to disclose that so people are aware of it. But Aimee, I'll let you introduce yourself a bit further and take it from here if you like.
All right, thanks Ben, thanks for having me. We got here in the end. And hi everyone, thanks for listening. So I'm just going to share with you today a couple of pretty amazing life experiences I have had. The first in 2016 was a 3-week trip to Antarctica. And the second in 2018, I spent 3 months on Macquarie Island. So I'm going to share with you a bit about both of those expeditions. But firstly, just wanted to give you guys a little bit of context about me and my background and sort of how I got to be where I am. So for the last 10 years or so, I've been trying to spend as much time as possible in the outdoors. It's what I'm really passionate about and where I like spending my time. So in my working life, I've spent a lot of time rafting, which you can see a picture from here, which is where I spent 3 seasons rafting in Switzerland. I've also been a canyoning guide, which I still do, in the mountains up at Cradle Mountain in Tasmania. And I also work as a bushwalking guide and do outdoor education with different schools. In my spare time or my free time, I have tried to visit lots of places and go on lots of adventures. So this is a picture from me in Kyrgyzstan, from a trip to southern Patagonia, where we went on lots of multi-day hikes. And this is me snowboarding in France, in the mountains of Chamonix. As well as working in the outdoors, I've also managed to spend some time on the computer, and I've finished a science degree in 2015, and I studied plants and animals and a little bit of Antarctic science as well. And this photo here is from me in the field in Tasmania, which was part of my honours project, where I was investigating the impacts of some bushfires we had in 2016 on pencil pines, on our alpine flora in Tasmania. So that's just a few things about me and sort of how this all happened. So I'm going to start with my Antarctic trip. So this was my first trip down south. And like many people, I've been pretty fascinated with Antarctica for a long time. As a teenager, I read the stories of Mawson and Shackleton and their expeditions down there. I studied some Antarctic science, and living in Tasmania for the last 8 years, it feels pretty close, especially on those wintry days when we get the southerlies coming up. So it's a place that's been on my mind for a long time, and I think what fascinates me about it is the extremes. As you guys probably know, it's one of the coldest, windiest and the driest places on Earth. Also, interestingly, some of you may be aware, but no one owns it. So it's governed by an Antarctic treaty, and it's actually a reserve devoted to peace and science. You can see over here, these are some of the claims that some of the countries have. So here's the Australian claim, French, New Zealand. But as long as the Antarctic Treaty is in place, these claims don't actually mean anything. And it's collectively governed, which I think is pretty interesting. So my trip south, you can also see on this map where it is in relation to the other countries. So we're down here. I'm down here in Hobart. So it's a bit of a way from here. I think it's about 3,000 kilometres or so. And up here, this is South America. So you can see it's much closer. And this is where most of the traffic down to Antarctica leaves from, because it's only about a 2.5 day sail. Whereas from Australia, I think it's about a week sail. So this is where I went from. I went from Ushuaia, and we explored this area, which is the Antarctic Peninsula. So how this happened. In 2014, so a little while ago, while I was still at university, a good friend of mine who is also a scientist told me about this program called Homeward Bound, which was just forming at that time, and it was looking for participants, women with a science background, to be part of a leadership mentor program in Antarctica. With very little expectation, I applied, and about a month later was completely shocked when I was told I had been accepted. And just a little bit about the program, if you haven't heard of it. It's a collaboration between a leadership program called Dutner Grant in Melbourne and a marine scientist from Hobart, just Melbourne Thomas. And they basically came up with the idea that to solve some of the world's problems, we need more women at the leadership table, and specifically people with a scientific background and training. So their idea and their vision is to take 1,000 women with science backgrounds from all over the world through this program, and to create a global network of women with leadership skills to help tackle some of the big problems we face. So I was on the first journey, and they have now had 5 journeys. And they've still got about 5 more to go. So it's a very ambitious program. So is everything all good, Ben?
Yeah,
Sound
yeah.
and stuff?
Yeah, no,
awesome.
It's all looking really good, mate.
Great. So when I was told that I had been accepted, I was very shocked, to say the least. I actually initially thought it was a scam. to be honest. Just because it hadn't been established and there wasn't that much news about it. I soon realised after talking to some of the organisers that it was not a scam. In fact, it was a real thing. And then I was just terrified because I had committed to fundraising a part of my costs, which was $15,000 US. And this was being in the context of being a third-year science student, having studied for the last 3 years, working part-time in a restaurant. I didn't have many funds accessible, so I was a little bit scared that I had bitten off a bit more than I could chew. And actually didn't tell anyone except my partner about it for about 6 months, sort of sitting on my hands in total fear. Eventually, though, I came to terms with it and talked to a friend who had done something similar and came up with a plan, and I dived in, first going public, trying to generate some media and some legitimacy. So I was in quite a few newspaper articles. I went on the radio. I was actually on quite a lot of the nightly news. And off the back of that, I began fundraising. So I started a GoFundMe page. I had a cake stall, as you can see there. I wrote lots of letters and did anything I could to raise the funds. I had a year and a half to raise the money, and very fortunately, with lots of people's support and generosity, I managed to raise all the money. And a year and a half later, I found myself in Ushuaia. So this is the very bottom of South America. And I met with the other participants. So there's 80 women, all with science backgrounds from around the world. And we all met in Ushuaia, boarded our boat and started sailing south. So as I said before, from Ushuaia down south, it's about 2.5 days of open ocean across the Drake Passage, which can be notorious for being very rough. For some reason, on all of my journeys south, I've had calm seas. The crew said it hadn't been like that for about 10 years, and they actually called it the Drake Lake. So we didn't have any of the big breakers coming across the front of the boat, which I was actually a bit disappointed about. But anyway, so we were cruising south, and as we headed down, we started to see signs of where we were going, bits of ice appearing, lots of albatross hanging around at the back of the boat, and the bits of ice got bigger and bigger as we got closer and closer to the continent until we were surrounded by these ginormous icebergs. And it's pretty hard to get a sense of scale from these, and they're much bigger than they look. These are about at least 10-story high buildings, and they were just floating past our boat, which was a pretty incredible experience. After those 2.5 days, we saw land, and then we started cruising down the Antarctic Peninsula. And the landscape down there, you can see from this picture, just gives you some perspective of the scale. Everything is huge. So these icebergs look fairly small, but you can see they're at least twice the size of our ship, which was not a small ship. This was an icebreaker. So it's all very dramatic and fairly breathtaking. So once we got to the shelter of land, we started going through a fairly intense leadership program, as well as exploring Antarctica. And this was, we'd spend half the day working through material and then half the day out exploring on the Zodiacs or going onto land. So some of the things we were covering in this program was different psychological analysis of ourselves. A lot was about self-awareness, and this for me was completely new. I'd never done anything like this, and it was a very steep learning curve, and it was very challenging, and for a lot of us quite uncomfortable and confronting. We explored purpose and values, trying to work out what's important to us, what we believe, and why we do the things we do. And a part of that self-awareness exploration was really exposing how we behave and how we interact with the world, which is quite hard to explain for people that haven't done any of it before, but is very revealing, and also exposes how things we might do and how we ways we interact that can also not be very helpful. One of those things about self-awareness was this idea that we really learnt how being self-aware gives you choice in how you behave. And it also, in terms of leadership, helps you better understand others. And this is a really important skill if you want to be a better leader. So this is basically what we were focusing a lot of our time on the boat. And another thing we were doing was learning communication skills, learning how different people learn, and trying to become better science communicators, because that is one of the things that was identified as missing in the dialogue. We know a lot of facts, but often they're not being communicated to the broad public. So we had to give this a whirl by giving a short seminar to the other participants on the boat, which for me was very challenging because I was one of the earliest career people. I just finished my undergrad on the boat, and there was participants there that were very advanced in their career working with the International Panel on Climate Change and things like that. So it was very challenging for me to do that. While we were not doing a deep dive into who we are, we also got out and about and got to explore our surroundings and all of the amazing creatures that live in Antarctica. So, of course, penguins are a big feature of Antarctica. There's quite a few species down there. We've got chin straps, Adelie penguins and gentoos. And with penguins, there's guidelines. You're not allowed to approach them, but they're very curious creatures. And if you sit still on the sand, they will often come up to you and have a little peck around, which was pretty amazing. This is one of the colonies we visited, which you can see is all the way up here.
Oh, wow.
It's the mega city of Adelie penguins, and very noisy and smelly places, but yeah, pretty incredible to witness wildlife on that scale. These are some of the marine creatures we saw on our journeys, all the different seals. So there's Weddell seals, crab eater seals, and these guys are leopard seals. These guys are very ferocious predators. And we were very fortunate to see lots and lots of humpback whales, which was incredible as well. Because we were 80 scientists, as a part of the trip, we were able to visit 2 of the research bases down there. So this one at the top, this is Palmer Station. That's the American base. This is the Argentinian base. And we met with the scientists that were down there doing all sorts of research on the continent, which was really interesting for us. A lot of them researching the effects of climate change that are having major impacts, especially on the Antarctic Peninsula. And we visited some of the legacy sites. So this was an old whaling station, which has since been abandoned. The boats they used to take out into the harbour where they used to live, and these are the machines that they used to render the fat in. So it was quite ghostly, a reminder of the past. And of course, we got to see and explore the incredible ice sculptures that are down there. These things are pretty incredible, pretty huge, and also pretty unstable. We went right past one on the Zodiac as a bit fell off, and it made a massive wave that almost swamped our boat, which was pretty exciting. So yeah, that's just a brief overview of my Antarctic trip. It's a lot happened. But are you happy if I keep going with Macquarie Island?
Yeah. I think it's been really nice.
Still there?
Yeah, the photos are amazingly clear as well on the screen.
Yeah, I had a good camera.
Yeah.
Yep, I took an LSR.
Definitely make it worthwhile. Like even how close the penguins were, getting them to pose.
Yeah, sorry?
Getting the penguins to pose the way that they did.
I know, they're good poses, aren't they? All right, so a little bit of change of tune. So this was a couple of years later. I had been back to university and finished a year of honours. I've done some more scientific research. And halfway through that year, a friend of mine contacted me and asked me if I would be interested to go down to Macquarie Islands to collect some scientific data for her, because she she'd done quite a lot of research there, but was no longer able to go because she had a health issue, which meant she couldn't pass the criteria to be able to go south with the Antarctic Division. So yeah, I of course said yes. And the following summer in 2018, I went down to Macquarie. I probably will call it Macca as well. That's what it's called by, oops, there we go. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about if I say Macca. So Macquarie Island, it's pretty much a needle in a haystack. So it's this tiny island, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. It's down here. It's halfway between New Zealand and Antarctica. It's quite a small island. It's about 35 kilometres long and only 5 kilometres wide. So you just walk everywhere on the island. It's got this high plateau that you can see here with these really steep drop-offs down to the coast that runs all the way around it. And the plateau itself is covered in all of these alpine lakes. Some of them are quite large all the way around. It's a very spongy, wet island. It gets a lot of rainfall, and there's no trees there. It's too far south. So it's just covered in tussock and moss, and it's all very wet and spongy and surrounded by this wild coastline. And interestingly, it's been made a UNESCO World Heritage Area because it is the only area of raised sea floor that's above the ocean anywhere in the world. So a lot of geologists love to head down there and look at it. A little bit lost on me, unfortunately. At the very north of the island, there's a station where over summer there's up to about 20 to 40 people living there, and over winter about 15. And most of those people are the people that are keeping the station going. So there's a doctor, there's a station leader, there's a plumber, a carpenter, chef, those kind of people. And then there's also scientific researchers. So this is me, and this is my partner in crime, KG. So we were both assigned to the project. So we worked a lot and spent 3 months together. As well as the station, so that's up in the north. Scattered along the coast of the island, there's a whole lot of field huts. So they vary, they're all pretty small and they vary in style, sort of old wooden huts to these, I'm not sure what they're made from, these plastic kind of UFO looking things. The island is incredibly windy. It's a constant presence, the wind, and it's very wet. And although it's not freezing temperatures, the average temperature in summer is about, it's between about 5 degrees. So it's a pretty cold place. So yeah, it's not really a great place for camping. So the huts are definitely welcome at the end of a day out in the field. This is a little zoom in, 1 second. This is here, Brothers Point. This is a zoom in of the hut. So this is one of the UFO looking things. So it's also commonly known as the Googie hut, the Googie egg hut. And this is the look on the inside. So it's pretty cozy. There's a little kitchen in here. There's gas for cooking and heating. And then there's beds along the side here. So this one's got 3 beds. All of the food is stored under the floor. So that's all stocked up with all sorts of canned, exciting goods. So there's all kind of canned vegetables, canned potatoes, never had that before, canned butter. And then this part here is a pantry. And because it is only ever maximum about 7 degrees, you don't need a fridge. So all the things like cheese and everything just stay out there, which is pretty handy. Cool. This is Green Gorge. So this is another hut. This is the next one down, sort of halfway down the island. And this is the east coast. So this is the calm area. The west coast gets hammered by surf because in this region you're being hit by the furious 50s, so constantly a westerly wind. So this side's much more sheltered. So this is Green Gorge. This is more of a traditional wooden hut. And you can see it's right on the beach, which is pretty nice. And these are king penguins, a king penguin colony right here. And they like to come up to the hut and just see what's going on. So kind of got to let them out of the way before you go down to the beach. And that's a very cozy hut. And you can see here there's a wind turbine as well. So obviously these are all off grid, and that provides power for just some lights inside. And all of the water, there's just streams everywhere. So you just get fresh water from the streams.
Aimee, is there any heating in the huts at all if you're staying there for a couple of nights?
There's little gas heaters in all the huts.
Yeah.
So your basic, home gas heater, but they're well insulated, so you can turn that on. It gets pretty warm, which is really nice. Yeah. If you to dry out all your wet clothes from the day. Yeah. So it was very nice. This is just another couple of photos. I just wanted to mention again the weather. So I realised in my photos there's a bit of a sunshine bias. And that's because I only got the camera out when it was sunny. So it looks like it's always nice weather, but it's actually most of the time was horizontal raining and super, super windy. And even though you can sort of see here, even though it looks nice and sunny, it was freezing. You can see how many clothes we have on, down jackets and everything. So it was quite hard conditions. And this was just towards the end when we got some snowfall, which was pretty cool. And this is just a short clip to try and capture some of the wind to give you an idea of the general conditions. 1 second. And the local elephant seals. So as well as the station personnel, so 20 to 40 people max in summer, Macquarie Island is home to a lot of wildlife, and it's really what makes this place really special. It's probably the most prolific wildlife are the penguins. So there are, these guys here are royal penguins, and Macquarie Island is the only place that they come to breed, and there's almost 1 million of them on the island, and they just form these massive colonies. There's king penguins, which are the second biggest penguin after the emperor. They also have about 100,000 breeding pairs. There's a few more penguin species that have smaller colonies, and there's a whole lot of seals that come there to breed. So the elephant seals, which are these brute-looking fellows that are ginormous and fairly scary, and the cuter little fur seals. It's home to albatross, including wandering albatross, shy albatross, and sooty albatross, and it's also home to a whole lot of other seabirds, prions, and skuas and things. Also, there's a lot of interesting vegetation. I said there's no trees there, but there are these things called megaherbs, which are these kind of like, this one is a giant cabbage-like thing with massive kind of rhubarb-looking leaves. And they're quite unique for the sub-Antarctic islands. And there's a whole lot of moss and things like that, if that's what you're interested in. So it's a pretty amazing place. Also lots of buzzies. I don't know if you have buzzies in Victoria. They're those things that you pull apart and they get stuck to your socks. There's fields of them. So that was a constant evening task, pulling off our socks. This is one of the penguin colonies, the king penguins. Yeah, and you can sort of get a sense of the enormity of these places. So they're just huge. I just wanted to give you a very quick overview of a little bit of the history of Macquarie Island, because it's quite interesting. It was discovered in 1810, and pretty much as soon as it was discovered, sealers set up camp there. And they started first picking off the fur seals for their pelts, which were then highly valued. It took them about 10 years and all the fur seals disappeared, which is pretty incredible. So then they moved on to the elephant seals, which are the big, fat, blubbery ones. They don't have nice, furry pelts, but they were able to render them down for their oil, which they then used for lighting. And they also started boiling down the penguins. So they had a pretty big impact on the wildlife. Also, while they were there, they brought deliberately and accidentally some feral animals. So they brought cats, they brought rabbits, mice and rats, and these birds, wekas, which is a kiwi bird. Once they had left, these animals obviously stayed and did a whole lot of damage to the native wildlife. The cats, mice and rats preyed upon the penguins and a lot of the burrowing seabirds, and the rabbits just destroyed the vegetation, just mowing it down, which causes a whole lot of erosion on those steep-sided cliffs. In 1998, Macquarie Island was declared a World Heritage Area, and the rabbits and cats were causing such a problem that they were threatening some of these values. So Parks and Wildlife of Tasmania, who actually is in charge of Macquarie Island, decided that they need to do something about it. So initially they trapped and removed all of the cats. They were all removed by 2000. But as a result of that, rabbit numbers boomed because the cats were preying on the rabbits as well as the native animals, which just caused so much damage to the vegetation that they decided something drastic had to be done. So in 2013, they did a massive island-wide baiting for rabbits, rats, and mice, which killed most of the population. And then they had hunters with detector dogs that were trained to hunt those three pests, walking up and down the island, scouring the island for any of the creatures that missed the bait. So they were there for 2 years. And yeah, they found a few, but then after about a year, they found nothing and they declared it a success. So Macquarie Island is now cat, rabbit, mice, and rat free, which is pretty incredible. And this is a picture of the recovery. So this was 2010, just before they did the baiting. And this is the same spot, and you can see the tussock grass is growing back. And there's a whole lot of research happening at the moment to see how the native wildlife is recovering, but it seems there's good signs. A whole lot of the burrowing seabirds are coming back and things are improving. So that's a pretty amazing story. So back to what the hell I was doing there, apart from looking incredibly dorky in this photo. So I was there to collect data for my professor and friend who's doing studies of the past climate of Macquarie Island. And so this is kind of similar to what they do in Antarctica with ice cores, but because there's no ice on Macquarie Island, they've adapted it to do it with mud cores. So what we were doing is collecting, up here we're collecting peat cores. So peat is, as you probably know, it's like an organic soil type. We have it in Tasmania as well. In Macquarie Island, it's incredibly deep and goes up to about, we got up to about 15 metres, maybe 10 metres. So you collect a continuous core of that. And we were collecting mud cores from lakes, which is what we're doing in these pictures. So we'd get in these little boats and we'd go out to the centre of the lake, this big corer, in all of our gear. You have to remember it's about 5 degrees Celsius and very windy. We'd go out there, pull out these tubes of mud very carefully, bring them back to the side, sit at the side of the lake for about an hour and chop them into 1 centimetre slices, and then bring them all back to the station. So we would then bring these back to Australia, and what my supervisor would do is she would carbon date each slice of mud so she could tell how old the mud was. She'd identify the skeletons of the little microscopic organisms that were in the mud, and then she was able to work out what the past climate was like on Macquarie Island from knowing what conditions those little bugs like to live in. So she does that bit, but it's pretty cool. So she's got data going back thousands of years, and we've collected all this new data that she's analysing now. And just briefly, why this is useful, if you're interested at all, just because it can help us understand if there's past fluctuations in climate, and it's also handy for the climate models we're using to predict future climates. If you can then look at them in the past and see how they compare with real data, you can see how accurate they are. So it gives us a better predictions of future climate. So that's what she was doing. But we were just collecting the data. So this is a very brief video of us doing a peak core, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So we'd be going down as far as possible and doing one after the other to get a continuous tube of mud going down as deep as it goes. And this is, yeah, it was very cold. You can see we couldn't do it with gloves on, and wet, and muddy. You'd have to clean everything afterwards, and it was pretty messy, but it was fun. And yeah, so after doing 3 months of field work, going up and down all over the island, the Aurora Australis, which you may or may not have seen, docked in Hobart, came and picked us up. It was pretty exciting. I've seen that boat down in the harbour a lot, and it's pretty amazing to be able to finally go on it. And this is a crazy thing called a LARC, which is a lighter amphibious resupply cargo vessel. And this is a crazy machine that is a boat, so it can go on water and then it can drive on land. And that is how they get everything off the Aurora onto the beach to resupply the station. So all the food for the next year, all the research supplies and everything comes on and off with this, which is pretty incredible. Seeing you guys are all outdoorsy people, I thought I would just finish with a little video of me taking a walk to the toilet. So you guys are all interested in how you go to the toilet in the outdoors. So I was fairly shocked when I found out this was procedure, but basically you go to the toilet on the beach, down here, do your business, and then you pick it up with spade and fling it into the ocean, which, yeah, kind of goes against everything I'd learned about minimal impact practices, but kind of made sense once you realise you're sharing the beach with thousands of penguins and all of their highly nutrient-rich waste is all going into the ocean. So I think little bit of human waste probably didn't contribute too much. Yeah, that's a little summary of my trip to Macquarie Island. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Aim. Sorry, I'm just going to get us back on screen together. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that and sharing the photos.
No worries.
That was really good to see, those interesting little videos. And it's quite for everyone out there sort of watching this and taking it all in. It's really nice for me as well to hear about your trip, Aim, because of the 2 trips, because there's lots of photos there that I haven't seen in the past as well. So yeah, it's really nice to get the insight into those places and into the sort of stuff that's going on down there. Really cool. Just a couple of questions that I had for you. I guess in considering those environments was, and I guess with our sort of theme that we're going for with these as well, is how, like, I guess the Antarctic trip, you're on a boat with quite a few people around you for the entirety of the time. The Macquarie Island trip, I just feel like that is a fairly remote place, a fairly isolated place. And can you draw any parallels or similarities between the time down there that you were for 3 months with, I guess, the COVID-19 restrictions that are sort of all happening now, and we're all finding it quite we can't go and see people that we want to, or can't go to places that we're used to going to. How was it doing it for 3 months? Did you manage that?
Yeah, you're right. So when I was there was probably about 24 people all up at station, but we were spending the majority of our time in the field. And in the field, it was mostly me and my friend KG, sometimes another person.
Yeah.
And we had internet and a phone connection at station, but internet was pretty poor. We also only had limited time on the telephone allocated, and out in the field there was no connection with the outside world at all. So in some ways, I think my personality suits that kind of environment. I'm naturally probably a bit of an introvert, so I like time to myself. But of course, it's a long time away. And of course, I missed my friends and family and my partner. I think how I coped was I tried as much as possible to embrace where I was, and like you say, I know you've been doing a bit on connection, and I think that's something that helped me there, and it does in my day-to-day life generally as well, but trying to really learn as much as I could about the island, the wildlife, all the different plants, the history, trying to notice them, like spend a lot of time hanging out with the wildlife and seeing how they behave and those sorts of things. And I suppose that comes, like, it's a bit cliche, but you know how they say it's like being in the moment. Kind of was like, instead of thinking about what I was missing out on, trying to notice what was around me. That helped me a lot. And also that connection also with the people around me. So there was 24 people, and I mean a lot of them were probably people I generally wouldn't hang out with, but you know, like just from like older tradies and things like that we might not normally have much in common. But I found down there, because there was no one else you could talk to, you just did strike up conversations with them, and I did find some commonalities and that they had interesting stories and found connection in people I probably normally wouldn't. So that was quite interesting for me. And I think that's an interesting parallel to now, because I've been finding that unless you live completely by yourself, there's always someone nearby, either it's a housemate or your neighbours or things like that, that you might have an opportunity to connect with. You might not be best friends, but you'll find some commonality, which helps. I obviously phoned home and talked to people when I was back at base, but for me, I actually found disconnecting a bit, especially from social media, was really helpful. And we didn't have much option because we didn't have very good internet connection. But not spending a lot of time on social media, like catching up with friends, but doing it on a quality basis, not just seeing photos, because then I'd get FOMO and miss everyone too much. So that's kind of what I did.
Did you find yourself talking to the penguins and other animals, making friends with them?
Yeah, for sure. Penguins are great friends. They like chase you around. That's super cool.
And I guess like you've been immersed in the environment the whole time that you were there, and maybe I don't know, I'm just wondering about it, you know, trying to get a distinction between work time and then play time, or you know, Aimee time while you're there. Is there different things that you did to connect with the environment to sort of as your downtime, I guess, while you were there?
Yeah, definitely. So we had a pretty busy field schedule. So we would go out into the field sort of for 7 or 8 days at a time, just really going every day, trying to get as much data as possible. So they were quite busy days. And then we would have downtime back at station. So often when we get back, we'd just be absolutely exhausted, and just that's when I just like let go and just do whatever I felt like, which sometimes meant just like watching movies and doing whatever. But I'd also get a bit bored of that after a day or two, and I always would get drawn back to going outside and going for walks and going and hanging out on the beach with the penguins. And that helped. I had a lot of projects as well, like to keep me busy, things like knitting and drawing and things like that. They're just things that I find relaxing personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think definitely for me, going outside and I'd go and sit on the beach and be surrounded by penguins. They were just like such special moments. I just try and do them as much as I could.
Yeah, that sounds really nice. And I do have one of your little penguin paintings from one of the trips as well, and up at home, which is really nice. Just mindful that I don't know this call if it might finish. We might run out of time soon. We'll just sort of see how it goes. What was when you got back to Hobart? Was there anything that you were sort of, really desiring when you got back into the real world?
Fresh fruit and vegetables.
Not canned potatoes.
That's it. Yeah. So there is a chef on station, so you have amazing food when you're at the base. When you're in the field huts, you cook for yourself. But it's all frozen, dried or canned. There is a very small hydroponic setup, so we had you'd have a couple of fresh lettuce leaves every day or two, but there was no fresh fruit, which I normally eat a lot of, so I was really craving that. And it tasted incredible when we first had it. It was just amazing. The other thing was I really missed trees, which was quite strange. And I remember when we arrived in Hobart, we were still on the boat, and I got up that morning and you could go up on deck and you could smell the eucalypts so strongly because you hadn't smelled trees for so long. Yeah. And I really craved doing exercise because we were walking, but you couldn't go outside and go running or ride a bike or anything like that. So that was something too. Yeah. And not to be blasted by the wind constantly was quite nice. Quite surreal.
And I guess that's kind of the questions. I'm sure you'll send through some photos of the surf at some point for me to have a look at. Macquarie Island.
Beautiful surf.
But I guess I just maybe you're a good person to have a chat to now as well about what you're doing, like your current employment. You're working as a ranger in one of the parks down in Tassie, and probably one of the few people in Tassie that have been lucky enough to be able to access the national parks over the last little while things have been closed down. But how are you in your sort of personal time at the moment, or time back in Hobart? How are you coping with the restrictions that we're sort of currently experiencing, and what sort of things are you doing to maintain your health while you're in this time?
For sure. Like I say, I'm very fortunate. So I work in the Tasman National Park, and we've still been able to go to work even though there's no people there. So that's been fantastic. Gets me out every second week. Days off, obviously home. And fortunately, I live at the foothills of Mount Wellington. So the national park at the top was closed, but we still had a lot of access to trails, which has been fantastic. So I've been able to go running and riding, which has kept me sane during this time. I have fantastic neighbours as well. I live next to a couple of great friends, so that's been nice just to have some chats over the fence. I don't know. I suppose probably like everyone, I've just been checking in with family and friends, been on the phone a lot, on the Zoom a lot, and just making sure everyone's doing all right. And I suppose also just like everyone, plans have been cancelled and it's impossible to make plans. So just trying to enjoy your day as it comes and doing lots of baking, things like that. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, as long as I can get out and do exercise, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Look, I really appreciate, and we at Outdoors Inc. certainly really appreciate you coming and giving your time and being willing to sort of share your stories and share your experiences. And I hope that everyone that's watching at the moment has really enjoyed chatting, or us chatting, or you chatting, and sort of seeing all the photos and stuff as well. Yeah, we will try and make available, like this webinar will obviously be up on our YouTube channel, so people can access it again if they want to, relook at any of the footage and things that you've shown. So yeah, I'd like to say thanks very much for your time and for coming along, and yeah, I hope that you enjoyed sharing it, maybe reliving the experience as well.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks for having me. It's good to go through the photos again, and yeah, hopefully some people got something out of it.
Yeah, I'll bet. I've been actually chatting with some of the participants lately, and one of them in particular had some really nice stories from Tasmania. He'd managed to get in and out before the shutdown all happened, and he'd done some of the Arthurs and Federation in Frenchman's Cap and South Coast Track, and a lot of walks down there. So I'm sure you're a big advocate for Tasmania and everything it offers.
If you haven't been down here,
yeah,
definitely come down if you're into the outdoors. It's fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, we'll stop the phone call now, and say, yeah, thanks again for joining, and see you.
Thanks for having me, Ben. See ya. Bye.
So I hope people enjoyed that conversation with Aimee, the chance to have a chat with her and hear some of her stories. And I guess it's just a different way for us to connect with an environment that not many people get the chance to travel to. We get to connect through story and through photos and through videos as well. And I have mentioned on the other sessions that I've done that it does seem a bit strange, sort of ironic to be talking about connecting with nature while we're watching things on a screen. But I've also mentioned that there is studies done and has been research done into the benefits of connecting with nature, and even just looking at pictures and photos of nature does have positive impacts on our health. So that's really good to know. If you are interested I'd like to try and give some further opportunities for people to follow up the stuff from the webinars that I'm doing. If the stories that Aimee told you about today really interested you, there's also some further interactions you can have with those places that she's visited. So the Antarctic Division, Australian Antarctic Division, have got some webcams set up, and also virtual tours and things like that. So you can check out these links. There's a virtual tour of Macquarie Island station, so you can jump on there and have a look at what it's like down on the island. And then also the Antarctic stations, the Australia's ones, there's weather webcams and things like that. So if you're sitting at home and thinking that it's cold at the moment, feel free to jump on one of those webcams and see what it's like a little bit further down south as well. So just some further opportunities tying in with today's content. Next, I'd like to introduce a little activity that we can do at home, thinking about something that ties in a bit with today. We don't have much snow around at the moment, so we can't go building snowmen or anything like that. But an opportunity, I was thinking trips down south. What else is south or southern? And we've got the night sky around us. So I thought today's activity is a really nice opportunity to keeping with the topic from today's webinar, is to use the Southern Cross to find south. So some of you may have done this before. If you have, it's really nice just to get out and look at the stars. Anyway, some of the nice clear nights that we're having at the moment. And it's also getting darker a bit earlier, so you don't have to sit up as late to look at the stars. But if you've not used the Southern Cross before to find south, then feel free to follow this link to the article on ABC website, and that's got some instructions in it. There's a couple of different ways that you can use it, and even just you may not have located the Southern Cross in the sky before, so just taking the opportunity to get out and have a look for that as well would be really, really good as well. So just a way for us to connect with the outside environment, connect with the stars, and see what's going on in the night sky. Thank you for coming along and joining in today's webinar. I hope you enjoyed the opportunity to have a chat with Aimee and hear her stories and get a bit more of an insight into those places that are a little bit further south than we are in Australia. I will put up some. This webinar will go up again onto our YouTube site, so if you'd like to access it at any point, you can. Some of the links that are involved in the website we can put up as well. In the webinar we can put up as well, so you can follow those up if you'd like to. I hope you've enjoyed the session and feel like you've got to explore somewhere new. I hope that people will take the opportunity to get outside in the next few days, if it is using the sky and the Southern Cross to find south, as I've talked about, or even just getting out for a walk during the daytime, getting out to your park, creek, whatever it might be. Try and get those motivation levels up to stay connected with the outside world, because it does benefit us as humans. Feel free to make sure you check out the other webinars that we've got up happening, or even some of the ones that have happened in the past, and check out those videos that are up on our YouTube channel. And you may get an evaluation from these webinars as well, so it'd be great to hear from you and what you've thought of them, things that you've enjoyed, things that you might like to hear more of. I'm really open to people's ideas, and any feedback is fantastic. One of the things which I mentioned earlier today, and we've done on other webinar sessions as well, is that people were really interested in some meditation type stuff when we've been talking to people on the phones and what you want to see. And I've come across some interesting things when I've been putting together these little sessions. And today I'd like to finish with a clip, which is, you can see the YouTube link there. Slow TV meditation. So it's from Antarctica, the Lemaire channel, which is a spot down in Antarctica as well. So it runs for about 15 minutes. It's video that you can watch, and then also a bit of a soundtrack to it as well. So feel free to stay and relax for as long as you would like to. And yeah, the webinar will finish at the end of the video. So thanks again for coming along. Hope everyone is well, and yeah, let's see you again in the webinar world, or hopefully the real world, at some point soon. So I'll get rid of my face and you guys can watch the meditation. See ya.